All right, so we have the helping relationship part six. So we have biofeedback. Biofeedback is hooking the client up to an electronic device that provides biological feedback. It helps clients control autonomic responses, which is like um, heart rate, your intestinal contractions, your blood pressure, things like that. It does not change the client, only provides the client and helper with biological information such that the client can master self regulation. When you think about biofeedback, think about a scale, mirrors, um, things of that nature. It's used to teach clients to relax or to control autonomic nervous system functions like blood pressure, pulse rate, or hand temperature. Temperature is referred to as thermal training. When targeting the brain, it is referred to as neurofeedback. So, when biofeedback is targeted towards temperature, that's thermal training. When it is targeting the brain, it is referred to as neurofeedback. A galvanic skin response, GSR, is a method of biofeedback which provides electrical skin resistance. So, galvanic skin response is a method of biofeedback which provides electrical skin resistance. EMG feedback equals muscles. EEG feedback equals brain waves in alpha state. The alpha state is awake and extremely relaxed. So, EEG is feedback on the brain waves in alpha state. And the alpha state is when a person is awake and extremely relaxed. The EKG feedback is the heart. So EMG muscles, EEG brain waves in alpha state, EKG heart. Pica is the tendency for humans to eat objects that are non food items or non nutritive items. So it's believed to be psychological difficulty. It's believed to lead to a psychological difficulty and or lack of minerals in the diet. Okay, so pica is the tendency for humans to eat objects that are non-food, non-nutritive items. Pica is believed to be a psychological difficulty or due to a lack of minerals in the diet. We have John B. Watson. He is credited with the Little Albert experiment. That was the experiment with rats where the little Albert was exposed to white furry animals, and this resulted in a fear. And by default, he feared the furry Santa Claus mask. John B. Watson and behaviorists believe that fears are learned and not the result of some unconscious conflict. John B. Watson is a behaviorist, and again, learning is the cause of fear. So you are learned or taught to fear. The Freudian theory believes that fear is the result of something deep below being wrong. So again, it's always the unconscious with Freud. Analytic psychology, Carl Jung, is also called depth psychology. Then we have Mary Cover Jones. She believed that learning is the cure for fear. She demonstrated that learning could serve as treatment for a phobic reaction. Then we have Neurolinguistic Programming, NLP, by John Grinder and John Bandler. It claims to cure a long standing phobia in less time than it takes to conduct a typical counseling session. So they said that John Grinder and John Bandler said that neuralistic programming could cure a long standing phobia in less time than it takes to conduct a typical counseling session. They believe in reframing. The counselor helps the client to perceive a given situation in a new light so as to produce a new emotional reaction to it. So, an example is the glass is not half empty, but is half full. That would be reframing, changing the client's perspective, how they perceive a situation. Then we have anchoring. Anchoring is a desirable emotional state is evoked via outside stimulus, such as a touch or a sound or specific body motion. It's similar to classical conditioning. So I think in the examples that I saw was like anchoring is like if someone is scared to get on an airplane, and while they're on the plane, they evoke um, a desirable emotional state. So like through pinching, they may like pinch their arm, so they're causing kind of like a pain um, and a distraction by doing that motion instead of focusing on the fear. So anchoring is a desirable emotional state is evoked via an outside stimulus such as touch or sound or specific body motion, similar to classical conditioning. Oh, and then I think like this was big when I was in high school, is like wearing a rubber band and like popping the rubber band on your wrist. That could be anchoring. So, and you'll be thinking like, of what you want to think about instead of how you truly feel. So congruence equals genuineness. So counselors is the counselor's ability to be him or herself. Empathy is a subjective understanding of the client in the here and now. So empathy is a subjective understanding of the client in the here and now. It deals with the client's perception rather than your own. The ability, so it's not what I perceive, but it's I am truly understanding how the client views and sees the situation. I'm empathetic to their situation. It's the ability to understand the client's world and to communicate this to the client. Sympathy often implies pity. We have Robert Karpov, who created a 5 point scale which measures empathy, genuineness, concreteness, and respect. A rating of 3 is the minimum level of acceptance. And remember, his 5 point scale measures empathy, genuineness, concreteness, and respect. Level 1 is not attending or detracting significantly from the client's verbal and behavioral expression. Level 2 subtracts noticeable affect from the communication. Level 3 feelings expressed by the client are basically interchangeable with the client's meaning and affect. Oh, sorry, feelings expressed by the counselor are basically interchangeable with the client's meaning and affect. Level 4, the counselor adds noticeably to the client's affect. On level 5, counselor adds significantly to the client's surface and underlying feelings, even in the client's deepest moments. So we have the global scale for rating helper responses, which was proposed by Gosta. Is a 1.0 response. Oh, a 1.0 response does not attend to client's needs. The counselor may discredit or even scold the client. 2 response is superficial and deals only partially with surface feelings. 3 does not facilitate growth but is limited primarily to surface feelings, but does not distort the content in his/her reflections. 4 is evident when the counselor goes above and beyond reflection and deals with underlying feelings and meanings. And that was the global response scale from Global Scale for Rating Helper Responses proposed by Gosta. Then we have Trans Theoretical Model, TTM, by James Prochaska. The steps, it was about the steps needed for change, which include pre pre-contemplation. The person is not ready to change or acknowledge the issue. So pre-contemplation, the person is not ready to change or acknowledge the issue. Preparation, the person comes up with ideas how to change. Action, the individual takes steps to improve. Maintenance relies on behaviors to prevent relapse and to perpetrate the new behaviors. Edmund Jacobson developed a relaxation technique in which muscle groups are alternatively tense and relaxed until the whole body is in a state of relaxation. Is popular in behavior therapy, and that was Edmund Jacobson and the relaxation techniques for muscle groups. Then we have Francine Shapiro. She's popular for creating EMDR. Francine Shapiro, EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is popular treatment for traumas, PTSD, and anxiety, can produce results without eye movement. And that's Francine Shapiro, EMDR. We have Andrew Salter. He's the father of behavior therapy. He performed groundbreaking work in behavior therapy, which led to the formation of assertiveness training. He believed in conditioned reflex therapy, which set the stage for modern assertiveness training. So, Andrew Salter, father of behavior therapy, performed groundbreaking work in behavior therapy, which led to the formation of assertiveness training. Believed in conditioned reflex therapy, which set the stage for modern assertiveness training. Assertiveness training is behavioral rehearsal. That a popular technique in assertiveness training is behavioral rehearsal, the act of practicing a behavior in a counseling session that can be beneficial in the client's life. So the counselor may also switch roles and model assertive behavior for the client. So assertiveness training, popular technique is behavioral rehearsal. Rehearse how you want to employ that behavior, and so that way it's beneficial in the client's life. And then sometimes the counselor may switch roles to model the behavior. So then we have flooding. Flooding is deliberate exposure with response prevention. It occurs when the client is genuinely exposed to the feared stimulus. So it is in vivo, meaning in real life and observable. So flooding is deliberate exposure with response prevention. It occurs when the client is exposed to the feared stimulus. It's a in vivo strategy outside of the mind in real life, observable. It is effective in agoraphobia, and agoraphobia is the fear of open places. It's also effective in OCD. Flooding. Flooding and impulsive therapy does not use relaxation, or do they introduce the fearful stimuli gradually. So it requires fewer sessions than systematic desensitization. Both flooding and desensitization therapy believe that avoiding the fear serves to intensify it, and that anticipation of catastrophe, meaning physical pain or loss of control, initially caused the symptom in question. So the three that you can link up is flooding, implosive therapy, and systematic desensitization. So flooding is you are going to be exposed to the fear. There's no relaxation, there's no slow introduction. It's I discuss it, we talk about it, we understand it, and you're going to be exposed to that fear. Flooding means it's going to be in real life, it's going to be observable. Implosive therapy is exactly the same thing, but implosive therapy happens in your mind, in your imagination. It's not going to be like real deal directly, um, like observable, you in that specific object, more like imagination. And then systematic desensitization is the same thing, but it's gradual exposure. So both flooding and desensitization therapy believe that avoiding the fear serves to intensify it, and that anticipation of the catastrophe, anticipation of the loss of control, the anticipation of the physical pain is initially what caused the symptom in question. So impulsive therapy always is always conducted in the imagination and sometimes relies on psychoanalytic symbolism. So flooding and impulsive therapy do not work in every case. Cases have been cited in which the prolonged exposure to feared stimuli actually tended to exacerbate the anxiety because they got thrown into it and then they were exposed for a long time and it was just too much. So flooding and implosive therapy doesn't always work. So we have fixed role therapy. A fixed role therapy was created by George Kelly. It's when a client is given a sketch of a person or a fixed role script, then instructed to read the script at least 3 times a day and to act, think, and verbalize like the person in the script. Is systematic and is also called the psychology of personal constructs. So, fixed role therapy is when a client is given a sketch of a person or given a script and then instructed to read the script at least 3 times a day. And then they have to act, think, and verbalize like the person in the script. Sensate focus is a form of behavioral sex therapy developed by William Masters and Virginia Johnson. This relies on counter conditioning, and we know counter conditioning is pairing a desirable response with an undesirable response to uh, undesirable with a desirable. A couple is in sensate focus, a couple is told to engage in touching and caressing to lower anxiety levels. the couple would touch and caress on a graduated basis until intercourse is possible. So, sensate focus is a form of behavioral sex therapy developed by William Masters and Virginia Johnson that relies on counter conditioning. A couple is told to engage in touching and caressing to, on a graduated basis until intercourse is possible. The goal is to lower anxiety levels. And we know that counter conditioning is when a behavior is modified through a new association with a stimulus of an opposite valence. So you replace an undesirable condition like anxiety with a desirable one, touching and caressing. It's pairing a negative with a positive. That was counter conditioning. Then we have Wilhelm Reich, Reich, Wilhelm, Wilhelm Reich. He felt that repeated sexual gratification was necessary for the cure of emotional maladies. He believed in the organ box therapy, which is a device which the client would sit in to increase organ life energy, as well as classical vagal therapy. The analyst enabling the patient to physically simulate the bodily effects of strong emotions. The client is asked to remove his or her clothing, lie down on a sheet covered bed in the doctor's office, and breathe deeply and rhythmically. That was classical vagal therapy by Wilhelm Reich, who felt that repeated sexual gratification was necessary for the cure of emotional maladies. And then moving on to our cognitive. We're going to just finish this out, make it the last part. Cognitive behavioral approaches are approaches which dwell on cognition while emphasizing behavioral strategies for change. REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, was created by Albert Ellis. So, Albert Ellis is the father of REBT. REBT assumes that the client's emotional disturbance is the result of irrational thoughts and ideas. The cure is a high dose of rational thinking. So, I'm going to read that again because that's the basis and the sum to remember. So, REBT assumes that the client's emotional disturbance is the result of irrational thoughts and ideas. The cure is a high dose of rational thinking. Rational emotion is the goal. Clients are disturbed because they are irrational. Clients are taught to change cognitions known as self talk and internal verbalizations. Talk sense to yourself. So, you know, REBT is basically saying that you are having irrational thoughts and ideas. So, to cure your irrational thoughts and ideas, you you do self talk. So you change the cognitions within your self talk, and you talk sense to yourself, which is internal verbalizations. We have Epictetus, Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher who suggested we feel the way we think. So that person thought that we feel the way we think. People are disturbed not by the things, but by the view they take on them. Alfred Korzybski, Korzybski, the founder of General Semantics, and Karen Horney, who first recognized the tyranny of the should when reflecting on the creation of Ellis Ellis's REBT theory. I don't know what that's talking about. The founder of General Semantics and Karen Horney, who first recognized the tyranny of the should. So like means like I should have done this, I should have done that, should. That's the tyranny of the should. And that creates emotional disturbance because of that irrational thought about all the things that you should have done. So masturbation is when a client uses too many should, ought, must in thinking, aka absolutist thinking, which leads to emotional disturbance. So masturbation is when a client uses too many should, ought, must in thinking, aka absolutist thinking, which leads to emotional disturbance. No matter how bad life seems, you always have the power to ameliorate, which is improve or make better, intense feelings of despair, anxiety, and hostility. A Guide to Rational Living, a bibliotherapy. I guess Albert Ellis wrote A Guide to Rational Living, which is a bibliotherapy. A bibliotherapy is the use of books and literature pertaining to self help, a form of homework. So, self help books, when you assign reading for self help books as homework, that is bibliotherapy. Yeah, and bibliotherapy is popular in REBT. So, homework is whenever the counselor gives the client an assignment which is to be done outside the counseling session. We have catastrophizing, or also called awfulizations, is telling yourself how difficult, terrible, or horrendous something is. So, I lost my job and it's the most terrible thing in the world. Um, Catastrophizing happens during the B. So, we're going to go over the ABC model, but just know catastrophizing happens in the B, the belief system. Clients can receive emotional control cards from their therapists that delineate irrational ideas and what one can think rationally to combat these unhealthy thoughts. So, REBT uses emotional control cards so that way it allows it provides rational thoughts that the client can use to combat the unhealthy thoughts. So only humans, REBT believe that only humans think in declarations. That would be internal sentences that can cause or ward off emotional discord, i.e., REBT promotes scientific thinking, and lower animals may be incapable of such a thought. Most therapies can be faulted for not emphasizing irrational beliefs at point B. So, REBT believes that most therapies can be faulted for not emphasizing irrational beliefs at point B, the belief system. Such theories wrongly asserts that A causes C, but REBT believes that A causes B, which causes C. All right, so the ABC model of cognitive behavior therapy. So, the ABC model, a cognitive behavioral therapy technique created by Albert Ellis, is used when a client holds irrational beliefs. The ABC model promotes the belief or saying that negative events leads to rational beliefs, leads to healthy negative thought. So it promotes that when a negative event happens, the person responds with a rational belief and then a healthy negative thought occurs. So it's not that it wants to get rid of the negative thoughts, but you want to have healthy and logical negative thoughts, not irrational ones. So A is the activating event, B is the belief system, C is the emotional consequence. So Ellis believes that irrational thinking about the belief system is at the core of emotional disturbance or emotional consequence. Irrational thinking examples. It's necessary to be loved or approved by every significant person in your life. You must be thoroughly competent in all areas of your life to consider yourself worthwhile. Some people are bad and wicked and thus should be punished for their actions. It is awful or catastrophic when things are not the way you want them to be. Unhappiness is caused externally by other things and people. An individual's past determines his or her happiness. It is terrible if a perfect solution to every problem cannot be found, and you need someone stronger than yourself to lean on. So the A, B, C, D, E, sometimes the D and E is added. D is disputing the irrational behavior at B, the belief, and E is a new emotional consequence or new effect. So that adds on. So you have the activating event, the belief system, which causes or leads to the emotional consequence. That would be lead to disputing the irrational behavior or the irrational belief, and then you create a new emotional consequence or a new effect. Didactic models of treatment are therapies that teach the client, such as REBT. So, didactic means to teach. We have Donald Mackenbaum approach, which is cognitive restructuring. So, Donald Mackenbaum approach is based off cognitive restructuring. Restructuring takes place when the client begins thinking in a healthy new way using different different internal dialogue. So restructuring takes place when the client begins thinking in a healthy new way using different internal dialogue. It is refuting irrational ideas and replacing them with rational ones. This change occurs through self talk and internal verbalizations. So, earlier, just to go back up a little bit, earlier we learned about reframing. And so, reframing is when the counselor helps the client to perceive a given situation in a new light. So, as to produce a new emotional reaction to it. So reframing is like the glass isn't not half empty, but it's half full. Reframing is a new way of thinking about a situation in order to create new emotions. Then we have restructuring. Restructuring is when the client begins thinking in a healthy new way using different internal dialogue. So that is refuting irrational ideas and replacing them with rational ones. That changes via self talk and internal verbalizations. So, reframe is to change how you think about a situation in order to react different. Restructuring is replacing your speech or your thought pattern with more rational ones. So, Reframing is saying, you know, the I lost my job, but I wasn't happy at that job. I think it was time for me to move on. So, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. That would be reframing, changing how you see or perceive the situation so you can elicit a different reaction. Restructuring, um, like same situation is if I lost my job and I'm like, oh, I'm never going to find another job. um, this is the worst thing is okay, I'm going to change my self-talk and internal verbalizations. Like, it doesn't mean that me losing this job doesn't mean that I will never find a job. That's jumping from one to another. This job just wasn't my forever job. So now it's just time for me to apply for new jobs. That's the rational thing, is like I can accept what happened and now it's time for me to move on. I don't have to think irrational like, oh, I'll never find another job. So self-instructional training is the implementation of his so-called stress inoculation technique, which has three basic phases. So Donald Meckenbaum approach was cognitive restructuring, and then he also had a stress inoculation technique, um, with three basic phases. The first is the client is involved in an educational phase. The client is taught to monitor the impact of inner dialogue on behavior. So that's the educational. You're taught to monitor the impact of your inner dialogue on your behavior. So when I think this way, I behave in this manner. You're monitoring that. And then two, clients are taught to rehearse new self-talk. That would be, i.e., rehearsal phase. Three is application phase, is where new inner dialogue is attempted during actual stress producing situations. So you educate, meaning you monitor and you learn about yourself, your thoughts and your behavior and how they correspond. You rehearse, so you create new self talk, affirmations, things of that nature, and then you apply when the situation presents itself. Then we have cognitive disputation. That's the act of changing the client's of thinking, mode of thinking, sorry. Cognitive disputation is the act of changing the client's mode of thinking. You dispute that cognitive thought. You change the mode, or the way you think. Rational imagery is when a client imagines that he or she is in a situation which has traditionally caused emotional disturbance. The client then imagines changing the feelings via rational, logical, scientific thought. That's rational imagery. You imagine the situation and then you change the feelings, um, via rational, logical, and scientific thought. Ima- Imaginal disputation is imagery to help with the process and urge clients to behave in different patterns. So, imaginal disputation is imagery to help with the process, and then behavioral disputation is urging the client to behave in different patterns. We have Aaron Beck, who's cognitive therapy, CT, or cognitive behavior therapy. Most of the time, we're going to see CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. So, CBT resembles REBT, Albert Ellis, and focuses on automatic thoughts leading to depression. So, Albert Ellis said that your thoughts are irrational. Is You're not thinking logically, you're thinking all emotionally, and it's just irrational. You're catastrophizing. CBT says that, hey, sometimes we're just going to get these automatic thoughts, and these automatic thoughts is what leads to depression. So it's not based off, REBT believes that it's based off of your belief system, like your belief is what causes the consequences, what causes you to be irrational. But CBT says it's automatic. CBT tries to treat problems and boost happiness by modifying emotions, behaviors, and thoughts. Beck insisted that dysfunctional ideas are too absolute and broad, though not necessarily irrational. So your dysfunctional ideas are just too absolute. So like when you're just really feeling down, you're like, I can't do it today. Like, life is just hard. Those are like automatic thoughts, but you're seeing things in an absolute way. It's not necessarily that it's irrational, it's just too absolute. Um, since Beck disliked the term irrational ideas, he emphasized rules or formulas of living, which cause unhappiness, and he suggested new rules which the client can test. So Ellis said that the in REBT that your thoughts were irrational ideas. Beck CBT says that it's not that your thoughts are just necessarily irrational. It's just that your formula of living or the rules that you have placed on yourself are causing unhappiness. So now you need to create new rules and test out new ways of living that can create happiness. So he believed that depression is the result of a cognitive triad of negative beliefs regarding oneself, one's future, and one's experience. The cognitive triad of depression asserts that the depressed individual feels worthless and has a negative view of him or herself, has a negative view of the world as unfair, and feels the future is hopeless. CBT has been shown to be applicable in cases of phobia. The Beck Depression Inventory, BDI, is a self report questionnaire. So, the Beck Depression Inventory is a self report questionnaire. Beck favored Socratic questioning. So, he favored Socratic questioning, such as, could I be misinterpreting the situation? Am I focusing too much on the negative aspect of the relationship? Those were Socratic questions under CBT. Then we have the metacognition, which is an individual's tendency to be aware of his or her own cognitions or cognitive abilities. So, metacognition. I am aware of my own tendency and my own cognitions and cognitive abilities. Then we have Maxine Maltzby. He is the father of rational behavior therapy, RBT. That's Maxine Maltzby. He, RBT relies on REBT. However, the client performs a self-renting analysis. It works well for multicultural counseling and group therapy. In group therapy, the counselor has a didactic, which is teaching, role in which participants are taught to apply the techniques to their own lives. So, in group therapy, the counselor is a teacher, didactic, and they teach you techniques in which you then go and apply to your own life. The leader encourages equal group participation for all members and gives reaching assignments. such as bibliotherapy between the sessions or homework. So RBT relies on REBT. However, the client performs a self-written analysis. It utilizes rational emotive imagery on a regular basis. RBT does. RBT uses rational emotive imagery on a daily basis. So that is all we have for the counseling and helping. Then we just have, two boxes of things to know that was pulled out the chapter, which is counseling techniques. You have the counseling paradigm equals treatment model. So counseling paradigm, remember paradigm is a model. So counseling model is the same thing as a treatment model. Paraphrasing is when the counselor restates a client's message in their own words. You paraphrase, you put in your own words. Insight, the process of making a client aware of something which was previously unknown. The therapist helps the client gain insight, the aha moment. It increases self knowledge. It described as a novel, sudden understanding of a problem. So it's a novel, sudden understanding of a problem. Insight is equated with the work of psychologist Wolfgang Kohler. Kohler studied chimpanzees and great apes. An intelligent chimp named Sultan needed to secure food placed outside the cage. The chimp, through trial and error, put the two sticks together, creating a longer stick and solving the problem. Kohler labeled this an insight experience. So just remember mostly that insight is the process of making a client aware of something which was previously unknown. The therapist helps the client gain insight, the aha moment. Introspection is any process in which the client attempts to describe his or her own internal thoughts, feelings, and ideas. Interpretation is to make the client aware of their unconscious process. Interpretation is to interpret their feelings, to make them aware of their unconscious processes. Is highly valued in analytic and psychodynamic modalities. The counselor uncovers a deeper meaning regarding a client's situation and must wait until the counselor client trust is established. That's interpretation. So you want to interpret deeper feelings in the unconscious. Confrontation is pointing out or providing a verbal response or verbal behavior which illuminates discrepancies between the client's and the helper's conceptualization of a given situation. So, pointing out the difference in verbal response or nonverbal response or verbal behavior. Summarization is whenever a counselor brings together the ideas discussed during a period of dialogue. It can be used to confirm the client grasp the meaning of an exchange. It can include reviewing what has transpired in past counseling sessions. Also, it can be used to condense the material to capture the essence of the exchange. Summarization can also be used to clarify meaning. So it can use to confirm or clarify the client grasp the meaning of an exchange. Alan Ivy recommends summarization at 2 to 3 points during each session and at the close of the session. Concreteness is the same as specificity. Specific. Concreteness equals specific is an attempt to eliminate vague language, concrete or specific language. Parroting is restating the client's message back verbatim. Parrot, Parroting is a big no-no. Attending Attending is behaviors on the part of the counselor which indicate that he or she is truly engaged in active listening, such as eye contact, nods, etc. So your behavioral movements as a counselor is attending. The affect is underlying feelings, emotions, and mood. Silence gives the client time to assimilate the counseling process and is helpful in non directive therapies because it coaxes the client to direct the session. So, terms not related to this chapter, we have type 2 or a beta era. That is a statistical term, which means that a researcher has accepted a null hypothesis when it is false. So we're going to learn later about our memory device RA. So type 1 error is an alpha error, and that means that they rejected when they should have accepted. And then type 2 or beta error is when they accepted when they should have rejected. They should have rejected it because it is false. And so that means, and that's in reference to the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is always the no, saying that there's going to be no change. And then false is equals no difference between experiments. So type 2 or beta error is a statistical term which means that a researcher has accepted a null hypothesis. They accepted a hypothesis that said that there's going to be no difference between an experiment. But it was a beta error because that was false. So then we have eidetic imagery is the ability to remember the most minute details of a scene or a picture for an extended period of time. Oh, that's like when people say they have good memory or photographic memory. They typically are just referring to eidetic memory, which is the ability to remember the most minute details of a scene or a picture for an extended period of time. It's popular in child psychology and development tests. This is eidetic. Eidetic imagery is usually gone by the time a child reaches adolescence. We have Brill, who is A.A. Brill. She's under career choice and career therapy. She is associated with the impact that Freudian theory has on career choice. We have E.G. E.G. Williamson, who is the father of the Minnesota viewpoint. E.G. Williamson, father of the Minnesota viewpoint, which is popular in career counseling. It attempts to match the client's traits with a career which became the trait factor approach. So the Minnesota viewpoint attempted to match the client's traits with a career, and then this became the trait factor approach. We have agoraphobia, which is a fear of leaving home. Fear takes place in a wide open space, a public space, or a closed place, such as an airplane, bus, etc. So, agoraphobia is a fear of leaving home, and if you were to leave home, you would experience fear in any of those spaces. Um, it could result in having a panic attack, might prove awkward and embarrassing. So the fear is rooted in entering these places, having a panic attack, and then feeling awkward and embarrassed. So the person feels trapped and can become worried about escaping. The standard error of measurement tells you if two sets of results are due to chance. It estimates how an individual's scores would fall if given the same assessment over a period of time. So standard error of measurement tells you if two sets of results are due to chance. It estimates how an individual's scores would fall if given the same assessment over a period of time. And that was standard error of measurement. Standard error of mean is the variability of the sample means. So does the sample mean vary? Is there error in standard error of mean? The variability of the sample means. We have standard deviation is a measure telling the amount of variation of a set of data points. So standard deviation, a measure telling the amount of variation of a set of data points. And we have NOVA, a statistical technique used to determine differences between two or more means. So NOVA is a stat technique and it's used to determine differences between two or more means.